Netflix's Devil May Cry anime is an adaptation of the Devil May Cry franchise that consists of games, manga, novels, comics, and an anime from 2007. And before I get into what the show is about and why I expect at the very minimum a decent show, I should explain a few things, mainly the timeline. Without the games, there are 2 light novels, a 2-part graphic novel, a full-blown novel, 3 comic issues, 2 mangas, and a 2007 anime. But the main and majority of the story is told through the video games. Before I get into the print content and the old anime, it's important to know that the games were not released in chronological order. There are 6 main games in total and 2 mobile games. The mobile games do not continue the story and are not considered canon. There's also a reboot between the 4th and the 5th game that didn't go as planned. The chronological order of the original continuity is Devil May Cry 3, 1, 2, 4, and 5. Before Devil May Cry 5 was released in 2019, DMC Devil May Cry was released in 2013. DMC stands for Devil May Cry, which means the game was literally called Devil May Cry, Devil May Cry. It was meant to be a reboot, but it didn't work out. According to Capcom, the IP holders, the reboot didn't work out because of delayed response to the expanding digital contents market, insufficient coordination between the market and game development divisions in overseas markets, and decline in quality due to excessive outsourcing. Basically, they said the new developers took too long, can't communicate, and the game sucked. Devil May Cry 5 was later released and continued the original continuity. My best guess as to why the reboot was called Devil May Cry, Devil May Cry is because it was a reboot done by Ninja Theory, unlike the other 5 games that were developed by Capcom. Actually 4 when the reboot was released, and the people at Ninja Theory didn't want people confusing their game with the first Devil May Cry game. The first of the 2 light novels was published in 2002, a year after the first Devil May Cry game was released. It was published first in Japanese and then translated to English in 2006. It covered the events until the first Devil May Cry game. However, after Devil May Cry 3 was released, the first light novel was considered mostly non-canon. But that changed after the Devil May Cry 5 novel Before the Nightmare and Devil May Cry 5, the game, were released in 2019. They made the first light novel canon. The second light novel was also first released in Japanese in 2003, and then in 2006 an English translation was published. It took place between the first and the second Devil May Cry games. In 2009, a year after the 4th Devil May Cry game was released, a 2-part graphic novel called Devil May Cry 4 Deadly Fortune was released in Japanese. There are no official translations of these 2 graphic novels. Devil May Cry 4 Deadly Fortune is basically a novelization of the 4th game. In 2019, both the 5th game and the full-blown novel, Devil May Cry 5 Before the Nightmare, were released. The novel is only available in Japanese and it takes place after the second Devil May Cry game. The comics were supposed to adapt the first game, but only 3 issues were ever published. That's because the company making the comics, Dreamwave Production, went bankrupt in 2005. In 2008, Capcom announced that they would be collaborating with Wildstorm, a DC comic imprint, on a Devil May Cry comic book series, but nothing ever came of it. Only 2 of a planned 3-part manga, Code 1 Dante and Code 2 Virgil, were ever released. The first one in 2005 and the second one in 2013. They take place roughly about a year before the 3rd game. In 2021, the first issue of Devil May Cry 5, Visions of V, was released. It centers around V, one of the protagonists, and playable characters introduced in the 5th game. V is a human with a mysterious past. The The first Devil May Cry anime was released in 2007. It took place between the first and the second game. It ran for one season with only 12 episodes. Each episode was like a monster of the week type of episode, although a season-long plot was introduced from the very beginning. The plot came to fruition in the last two episodes. Devil May Cry is an action-adventure urban fantasy that takes place in an amalgamation of various Western countries and time periods. Stylistically, it's a gothic punk hack and slash, and judging from the trailers, I think they just about got it right. But it's a very small sample size, we'll just have to wait and see. It follows Dante, the younger of a half-human, half-demon twins. He also happens to be a for-hire demon hunter / private investigator. He and his older brother Virgil don't always see eye to eye. Their past is shrouded in mystery and pain. He learns about his past and his heritage through various encounters with demons on his missions. Personality-wise, he's carefree and confident, but he can also be cocky. He prefers to look at the funny side of whatever terrible situation he often finds himself in. He always seems to have a witty comeback and even taunts his enemies before battle. He's also a big fan of pizza and strawberry sundaes. I also appreciate those things, and unlike him, I've got the stomach to prove it. Dante, being half human, half demon, finds himself in the middle of a conflict between demons and humans. The conflict being a demonic invasion led by a powerful demon known as the White Rabbit, who seems hell-bent on unleashing death and destruction onto the human world. That is, unless Dante turns himself in. The White Rabbit made its first appearance in the unfinished Devil May Cry manga, which is a prequel to Devil May Cry 3, and that makes it the first entry into the Devil May Cry franchise. That suggests that the Netflix adaptation is going to be in chronological order, and I like that very much. Going in chronological order makes things easy, and easy is always good. Season 1 has 8 episodes, and I think that's more than enough to cover the 2 prequel manga. According to show creator Eddie Shankar, Netflix's Devil May Cry series does not directly follow the story from the games, nor is it taking place in the same timeline as the games, but rather it's restarting the story in a separate but similar Devil May Cry universe. To the Devil May Cry fans, that does not sound promising. That sounds like there will be lots of changes. However, I do have some hope. Adi Shankar has recently been involved on some shows that I really liked, mainly Castlevania, which is probably the best video game adaptation ever, and Captain Laserhawk, a Blood Dragon remix, which was inspired by Far Cry 3, Blood Dragon. He was also involved in Castlevania Nocturne, which is another video game adaptation based on Rondo of Blood and Symphony of the Night games, but that wasn't as good as Castlevania. However, Guardians of Justice, the show between the two Castlevania, was pretty bad, but it wasn't a video game adaptation. I'm hoping he can carry on with the good work from his previous successful works, and he's learned from the failures of the Guardians of Justice. Anticipation score 6.5 out of 10, because I think Addy can do Devil May Cry justice, even though he's going to deviate from the source material quite a bit.